Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. The media has been buzzing about Senate Bill S-210. What exactly is it, and what does it mean for Canadians?
Let's take a look.
First of all, what exactly is a Senate bill, and how is it different?
A Senate bill is just that, a bill that originates in the Senate, as opposed to one that originates in the House of Commons, as we're used to seeing. Senate bills are designated with the letter S, whereas bills that originate in the House of Commons start with the letter C. This bill is called Bill S-210.
When a senator initiates a piece of legislation, it goes through 5 stages in the Senate: first reading, second reading, committee stage, report stage, and third reading. Once it passes these 5 stages, it then moves to the House of Commons, where it moves through similar stages until both houses reach an agreement regarding the bill.
So, now that we know what a Senate bill is, and we know how it actually operates in terms of navigating through the Senate and through the House of Commons, what is this bill? Well, let's take a look. So this is Bill S-210. An act to restrict young persons' online access to sexually explicit material. So what this essentially is saying, you can probably read into this for yourself, but in case you're not following, this is essentially addressing a apparent issue where young adults or even young children are accessing sexually explicit material online, and this aims to restrict that or disable that. So in summary, this enactment makes it an offense for organizations to make sexually explicit material available to young persons on the internet. It also enables a designated enforcement authority to take steps to prevent sexually explicit material from being made available to young persons on the internet in Canada. Okay, so what does that mean? That means if an organization is actually posting adult content, they would be held liable if a minor ended up accessing that material, and there would be punitive measures attributed to that organization. So what this is essentially doing, if you get down into here, we can extract this from the purpose. So the purpose of this act is to protect public health and public safety, and in particular, A, protect the mental health of young persons by restricting their access to sexually explicit material. B, protect Canadians, in particular young persons and women, from the harmful effects of the exposure of young persons to sexually explicit material, including demeaning material and material depicting sexual violence. And C, deter organizations that make sexually explicit material available on the internet for commercial purposes from allowing young persons to access that material. So this implies that there is a problem out there whereby people that are watching this material are being influenced in terms of their mental health, maybe in terms of their development, and that is having a negative effect on women in general. This is what we can extract from the text of this. So let's get into what the punitive damages are. So if any organization for commercial purposes makes available sexually explicit material on the internet to a young person is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction and is liable for A, on the first offense, a fine not more than $250,000, and B, for a second or subsequent offense, to a fine not more than $500,000. So how are they planning on doing this? Because, as we all know, the internet has been around for decades, and typically the responsibility has been on the parents. Watch your kids. Make sure they're not watching this stuff. And so it is essentially saying that if it is not a defense for an organization to say, well, we believe that the young person referred to was at least 18 years of age, it's not our fault, unless the organization implemented a prescribed age verification method to limit access to that material. We'll get into that in a bit. Now, the second defense that a organization may have under this new law is that no organization shall be convicted of an offense under Section 5 if the act that is alleged to constitute the offense has a legitimate purpose related to science, medicine, education, or the arts. So if the young person is accessing this as part of a school project or whatever it might be, which would be a very strange school project, that would be allowed. And then the last offense that an organization may have would be under Section 5 is if in relation to the act that is alleged to constitute the offense, the organization has received notice under Section 8 and has taken the steps referred to in paragraph 8.2, blah, 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 blah. So basically, if there was notice given that a specific minor was going to be accessing this material, it's effectively done with consent. So in that respect, they would not be held liable. So let's get into the real question of this, which is, how are they going to do this? Well, they keep referring to a prescribed age verification method. So it sets it out here, kind of. It's a little vague. So it's in Section 11 here under regulations. The governor and council may make regulations for carrying out the purposes and provisions of this act, including regulations prescribing the age verification methods referred to in subsection 6. So what this means is the governor and council will go away and figure out what these age verification methods are going to be, and then that's what the organizations have to comply with. Now, it makes sense that this isn't actually in the bill because these could change. They could be valid and effective 1 year, and then the next year they're no longer valid and effective. And you wouldn't want to rip open that law and go through this whole process of amending it and sending it through the Senate and sending it through the House of Commons just to change what the actual method is. But this way, it basically says we have to have them, and they can be decided, outside of the bill. So what it does say is, what are the requirements of this age verification method? How do we verify that the person that is accessing this content is actually an adult and not a minor? So the method has to be A, reliable, B, maintains user privacy and protects user personal information, C, collects and uses personal information solely for age verification purposes, except to the extent required by law, destroys any personal information collected for age verification purposes once the verification is complete, and generally complies with best practices in the fields of age verification and privacy protection.
Sounds pretty good, right? So why is everybody up in arms about this bill?
So there's a couple of things here. On the surface, sounds great. Who is for exposing minors to adult content? I don't think you'll really find anyone, sane that would be for exposing minors to adult content. But here's the problem. In the enforcement of this, you are going to have to implement systems in order to verify the age of somebody. Now, it's unclear as to what those systems are going to be. Are they going to be requiring the enter of a driver's license? Are they going to be requiring entering of a credit card number or anything like this? The argument some people would make is, well, why am I being, asked to do that? That doesn't make sense. And the organizations themselves, they're probably asking, well, why am I being asked to do that? I'm just producing the content. Why is it my responsibility to prevent certain demographics of people from accessing it? And other people will just say, well, why aren't the parents doing their job? So those are some of the initial restrictions and issues that I see people having with this. The overall issue that I think we're going to hear from this is one of possible identity theft.
And also, why is the government overreaching and requesting, someone's personal information just so that they can access adult content on their personal device in the comfort of their own home?
Well, and this is what isn't clear. Is the government going to be setting up a system that these organizations have to interface with? If so, I'm kind of worried about that. I'm sure you're worried about that. What that would mean is that when an adult wants to access adult content, they would have to provide some sort of personal data, call it your birth date, your name, your driver's license number, something that proves you're an adult, whatever they decide that is. And then that has to be validated somehow. So how is the organization going to validate that? If the government intends on having the organization validate that through the government, well, now you're passing information back and forth through a couple of different organizations in order to validate that. So it's very unclear actually how they're going to do this, which is the piece that's actually missing in the bill. Who validates this? You don't have to actually say what method you're using, but someone has to validate it. So, having your data out there is not going to be something that people are going to be comfortable with.
Well, and people who search for adult content, the things that they search for are often quite private. They don't necessarily want their name or driver's license or credit card number attached to those things. This is a huge invasion of privacy.
Right. And, although if we go back to the bill, you'll see that subsection D or 2D under regulations, it says that there's a requirement to destroy any personal information collected for age verification purposes. Yeah, well...
When? How soon?
Right. And, again, how are they going to validate that? And how do they still even know that it's an adult sitting behind the screen? So there's so many issues with this. And the problem is Fox and I were talking about this before. When you're trying to regulate something on the internet, the issue is that the bureaucrats are treating the internet like it's a specific type of medium, like a book or a movie or music or something like that. And the problem is the internet is literally everything.
Well, and the thing is, for example, right now, if you wanted to purchase an adult magazine, let's say, you would go into a certain type of store. If you're young enough, they may request to see your ID. You'd make your purchase and out you get. They're probably applying that same process to the internet, but the internet's a lot different. You're not going anywhere. You're staying in your own home usually. So you cannot say, okay, well, we do it in the meat space, let's do the same thing online. It doesn't work that way.
Well, it's like how they're trying to take C11 and C18, which are born from specific broadcasting bills that were implemented way back in the day for the TV broadcasters. You didn't have every Tom, Dick, and Harry with a TV station, right? You only had specific large organizations that actually were equipped to be a TV station. So you didn't have to worry about random Joe Schmo complying with your TV regulations. All you had to worry about is a very small manageable amount of organizations that you're regulating. But this is different. They're trying to apply that same logic with Bill C11 and C18 to the internet, where everyone is a potential broadcaster. Same thing here. You're essentially trying to do something that parents should already be doing. It's the ultimate nanny state at this point. So same as this food in the school bill that they were trying to push through, and blaming the conservatives for not voting against that. The parents should be the ones that are making these lunches for these kids and sending them to school. Now, one of the problems is there's not enough food because of the carbon tax and all the cost of living and the rest of that. That's a different issue entirely. But the issue is that the government seems to think that the solution to everything is more government involvement. And sooner or later, all you're going to see is you're going to be regulated by the government for literally everything you do. And that's not Canada, that's North Korea.
Well, and again, this bill was proposed by a conservative senator and has made it through all the stages in the Senate, and now it's made it through first, second, third reading in the House, and is now in... This was just referred to the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security, where the House has risen for the winter. They won't be back until January 29th, so they're not actually going to look at this until January 29th. Now, another thing that everybody is very upset about is that A, it was introduced by a conservative senator, and B, that it was supported in the House of Commons by the Conservatives, by the NDP, and by the Bloc. The only major party to vote against it were the Liberals.
So, why is that? Aren't the Liberals all about online censorship? Are they actually wisening up? No, not really.
A spokesperson for the Heritage Minister told the Canadian press earlier this year that the government was working on its own approach to dealing with online harms, and the Senate bill overlapped with their work. So essentially, the Liberals didn't vote for this because they've got their own bill going on. So it's kind of like, which is worse at this point? Let's take a look at what the Liberals are trying to introduce.
So the Liberals have their own bill, and many of you may be already aware of this, and it's called the Protecting Canadians from Online Harms Act. And what this is saying is that too many people in Canada are victims of hate speech, which is often amplified and spread on social media. Canadians want action, and they want leadership that will put a stop to harmful online content and hold platforms accountable. Now, the interesting thing is that this says a re-elected Liberal government.
Yeah, so what happened was the Liberals actually ran on this in 2019, saying that in the first 100 days after they were elected, they would table legislation regarding the Online Harms Act. And then they ran again on it in 2021 because they didn't do it the first time. And it's more than 100 days since they took government in 2021. And this bill still has not been legislated. If you try to go to ourcommons.ca to search for this bill, it's not there because it has not been written and presented to the House yet.
So if it was, this is what it would do. So it would combat serious forms of harmful online content, specifically hate speech, terrorist content, content that incites violence, child sexual abuse material, and the non-consensual distribution of intimate images. This would make sure that social media platforms and other online services are held accountable for the content that they host. Our legislation will recognize the importance of freedom of expression for all Canadians and will take a balanced and targeted approach to tackle extreme and harmful speech. Well, here's the thing. Some of you may say, that sounds kind of reasonable. Or maybe not. Maybe all of you are viewing this like the way Fox and I are, which is, what is hate speech?
Right. If I call Justin Trudeau a turkey, is that hate speech?
The problem with hate speech is it usually comes down to the person deciding it. Who gets to decide what hate speech is? And this is the slippery slope that's the problem, right? So what if the government decides that anything conservative is technically hate speech? They could do that. And then what that would do is prevent people from saying certain things. Yet they then talk about freedom of expression later in this paragraph. Well, you can't have one without the other. You can't have freedom with expression unless you allow people to say nasty things to each other.
Well, and that's it. Freedom of speech does not come without the freedom of getting offended. And it's up to you whether or not you're going to allow yourself to be offended.
Right. And if you don't allow quote-unquote hate speech, then by definition, you are not allowing freedom of expression. This is the problem. It's literally the same thing as protesting. And this is where this gets very problematic. Because this is the Protecting Canadians from Online Harms Act, but once that's in, now you have a precedent. What is to stop the government from then saying, well, we're doing this online, we might as well do this out in the real world? And now you're talking right to protest. Because by definition, a protest is something that is going to offend somebody. It's going to bother somebody. Ask anybody who is on the other side of a protest. They're bothered by it. Now, it doesn't mean the protest is wrong. Maybe the protest is wrong. The issue is that's right to assembly. Canadians have a right to do that. You may not agree with them, but they have a right to do it.
So what are we going to do about all this? Well, the Liberals' bill is not even a bill yet, so we don't really have to worry about it at this point. Keep it at the back of your head because it may turn into a bill, but right now it's not something that needs our attention. The Senate bill, on the other hand, is in committee, and committee and the House have risen for the rest of the year, and they're not back until January 29th. So it's not pressing. It's not going to happen within the next month. But what you can do within the next month is you can write a very articulate and polite email brief to the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. I'll make sure we put a link in the description. And they look for briefs from the public, which include facts and opinions and how it's going to affect you. So if you believe that Bill S-210 is going to affect you, you can write a brief and send it to the committee and they will review it.
So one of the main questions that a lot of people are going to ask is, why aren't we relying on the parents for this? And the answer to that is, in my humble opinion, we should. We should be relying on the parents for this. And there's different measures that you can take. Many of them are no cost. They take a little bit of research, but you can actually implement parental controls on phones. You can implement parental controls on laptops. You can set your child's cell phone to data only. To voice only. So there is no data plan. That still allows you to text them, but it doesn't allow them to actually browse any internet or anything like that. Now, yes, they can connect with the phone to a Wi-Fi network and stuff like that, but you can still implement controls on the phone. So there are many, many ways to do this, and there are companies out there that are constantly inventing ways to help parents protect their kids from this type of stuff. But the bottom line is just because parents are not necessarily doing this doesn't mean that the government gets to step in and do it for them. The minute you start allowing the government into your home to decide for you what your kids can and can't do, then we are talking a serious invasion of the family unit that we've already seen start to happen. And in my opinion, folks, we need to start pushing back and do something about it.